let's steer a little bit different here as we finish. I just want to ask you a question. You refer to yourself as an anarchist, and we've been saying voluntarist on the show more recently because it like makes people think a little bit more and makes them not write it off so quickly. But
do you remember that show about the military people calling in with the same crew 2 nights in a row?
I was going to ask, was that you?
That was me, yeah, in Guantanamo.
So I mean, you had the same conversation with the same people 2 nights different. Used voluntarist one day and anarchist the other day, and got totally different results from the same people.
It was like magic. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, that wasn't where I was going though. What I really want to ask you is, so now you're a law enforcement officer. You're sent out to do things that you would prefer not to do. What is it like for the? Because I mean, some people would just say he's not an anarchist. Shut up, go drive on the roads and tell me you're an anarchist. Then whatever, right? So because we all do things to make a living, etc., and we do it within our personal philosophies as best we can. What is it like to deal with that though? To realize that there's times like I really don't want to f with this guy. I really don't give a damn what this guy's doing because he's not hurting anybody. But I'm out here. I've got a partner with me. It's been seen. Now I've got to take this guy to jail or something like that. What's that conflict like?
On some days, on most days, this job tears me apart. I thought that when I was a kid and I saw my dad wearing his uniform and I was in diapers and I'd run up and hug him, and I was like, oh, your shirt's really itchy and that bag's really cold, but you're my dad, you're my hero. From that moment, I thought everything's black and white. I'm blindly patriotic. If you don't listen to the police, you're an idiot. And I thought most of that for most of my whole life. And you might not like this one, but it's meant in good fun. So you had a show once where you said something about debt, where you said, if anyone in my show pays off all their debt and then they regret it, you can come on my show and you can call me an idiot. And you can say, you know, I regret paying off my debt. You're an idiot, Jack.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
So I can tell you, from listening to this show, I have been awakened. I'm an anarchist, libertarian, whatever you want to call it, voluntarist. And I can tell you it has wrecked my entire plan for my life. I was so much happier being blindly patriotic and ignorant and thinking, if you break the law, there's a law. You should have read it. You should have known. You're bad. The police are good. I'm going to come arrest you. I no longer ever think anything near that. I've written in a couple times, and I have the lowest arrest rate on my squad because there's a number of questions I ask before I arrest anybody. 1 is, did you hurt anybody? 2 is, did you steal from anybody? 3 is what I'm doing basically a tax collection for the king or for the state? And if all those questions start adding up and I'm like, yes, this is legitimate, I more than happily make my arrest. Sometimes that's not the case, specifically with I think Texas calls it family violence. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah.
So
domestic violence.
If you have any type of intimate relationship with someone, whether it's brother, sister, mom, I don't mean intimate like sex. I mean,
I got
like you're a family unit, like you have lived together as children or you're roommates, but you kind of share everything. If you guys touch each other, and I mean like a punch or a kick or any type of physical touching, and I show up, I don't work in Texas, but my friend does, and he keeps me up to date. I work in Florida, and it's the same issue. Police are almost like 99.9% required. There's a little bit of gray room, but almost entirely required to make an arrest of somebody. Those are the cases that, for the most part, really hurt me. A little bit. And I don't lose a ton of sleep over it, but one example is we had a sheriff's deputy who was off duty, and he was home for Christmas, and I didn't work with him, but a friend of mine did. And my friend's telling me the story. He's like, yeah, one of the guys I worked with was off for Christmas, and he was at his mom and dad's house, who were elderly, and mom burnt the turkey, and the kid said something, the kid who's a sheriff's deputy, and the dad like shoved him, and somehow the police got called.
Okay.
This is not uncommon, especially for the holidays when you get a bunch of people together. And I guess the arriving officer knew the family. And he knew that one of the people in the family was in law enforcement. He said, listen, I'm really sorry. He's like, but you have to go to jail tonight. He's like, no, nothing happened. It was a push. It was fine. Everyone's happy. He's like, no, you don't understand. If I don't do this, I could lose my job. Now, there is a little bit of wiggle room, but things like that, they're starting to take away our discretion. But I'm going to be honest with you, Jack. I don't think it's as bad as sometimes people in this community make it. So keep that story and put it in your back pocket. When I operate, my old man told me this is one of the best jobs in the world. I have yet to see that, but I do like that my old man told me when I get in that squad car and I start my patrol, I am the CEO of that squad car. And I handle my business like I want to handle my business. And for the most part, I've seen that is true. I have had tons of cases that I've worked where at the end of the case, I said, nobody's going to jail. No one's getting a ticket. No one's getting a warrant for their arrest. Everyone act like adults, apologize, go home, go your separate ways. I do that very often. I do see a trend that we're losing our discretion, but it's very slow. That doesn't mean it's wrong, but I still think it's wrong, but it's very slow, but we are losing a little bit of discretion. But the problem is it's so, I think the underlying problem with, anarchos and libertarians and law enforcement, it's that so many of them, government training won't solve it. And so many of them lack critical thinking. And nobody asks the questions, why am I arresting you? Is this law a legitimate law? Can I go with not arresting you? Can I write that in my report? Can I make it sound reasonable that I don't arrest you? And so many people get caught up in, I want to go to the special unit. I better get a lot of arrests. Or, I am the first one. Everyone that's ever spent 5 minutes getting to know me, I'm sure you can see on this 1 hour show too, but I am the first one to criticize law enforcement and leadership and bad government. I've been very lucky that when I first got to my squad in my agency, my sergeant and my lieutenant, they both said to me, we do not want you doing traffic enforcement unless it's urgent and someone's going to die. They said, we want you to be ready to rock all night long through the night shift. In case something bad happens to someone else, we want you there. We don't want you writing tickets. We don't want you sending people to court. And when I heard that, my heart melted. I was like, oh, thank God. This is not terrible. I can deal with this. This is good. So it's still out there. And that's another reason I started the website too. I am very happy to point out the terrible things that happen in both the military and law enforcement careers. But also, I'm happy to surprise you with some things that, you might want to consider aren't as bad as they seem.
I think that's important because I think one of the problems that the libertarian, anarchist, voluntarist, the whole group community has on the civilian side, right, is that very often we see only the bad and therefore we forget the good. Because I've always tried to be fair. When I see a cop beating the shit out of somebody, right, like my first instinct is that he's an oath breaker, right? But then my next thing is, well, is the guy trying to kill him? Right? Because if you're trying to kill me, I'm going to beat the shit out of you till you stop trying to kill me, right? So I always try to take a fair, even-handed look at these cases of supposed officer abuse. And unfortunately, I find a lot of them where I go, this is just, you can't do this. I don't care if you have a shiny badge. But then I find a lot of times that our community jumps the shit of an officer when you're going, you know what? Everything was by procedure. Everything was by legal, was legal and done to the standard. And then that to me, that's a little bit of a gray area because there's a judgment in that. Like, should you have done it anyway? And we can, but if I'm going to sit on so then as a person, I might say, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. But if you put me on a jury, then I'm not going to convict that officer because he followed his training, he followed the law. And he was reasonable under the conditions as set by his training. And then there is also the times where maybe that's not what an officer's supposed to do. But what if I was the cop and I wasn't a cop? What if I was, in that situation and someone did whatever they did to that officer to me? Might I, as a human being, simply say, you know what, dude, you're getting an ass beating? And the reality is, you guys are really at a higher standard there than I am, right? Because you're doing the job, and we have to have some understanding, though, that sometimes people snap, and sometimes they snap at an asshole who seriously deserves it. Really. And then we have the officers that, like, you just look at the whole totality of it and go, that was just wrong. It should have never happened. It's the officer's fault, or it was outside of procedure. And unfortunately, I feel like many of the people in the liberty movement are so hungry to find those guys and point them out that they'll just take anything and make it that. And I think that hurts us because then we lose credibility with rational, sane people that we can pull out of statism because they go, well, you kind of left a bunch of things out, like that narrative of don't shoot hands up never happened. You know, I mean, that type of thing.
If we're going to do it, we need to be honest. And I'm more than happy to point out bad policing. Nothing makes me happier than government at its worst when I can point it out. But if we're going to talk about that, if I meet you one-on-one and someone in the street walks up and says, hey, what do you think about that? More than happy to trash police work as long as you bring me all the facts and we look at them and we talk about them. Because you and I both know, and I'm sure most of the people in the audience, the media is not the most honest source of information.
And they're really tricky in this world because one minute you look at them and you say, these guys think that cops crap golden eggs, right? Like they just seem to be the most protectionist. And then the next minute, they're completely throwing law enforcement under the bus at the same. And I don't mean like Fox News does it one way and MSM. I mean the same media source does this with. It doesn't seem to have any kind of even-handedness because I do it, I think, with even-handedness. Like, this guy is just a piece of shit. And then this guy over here that everybody, my own people are jumping, I'm going, wait a minute. You don't know the totality here. Like the guy that died in New York. I can't remember his name now.
Yeah, the large guy, the guy that chokehold?
Yeah, the chokehold. So when I first heard that, my view was this. NYPD has a standard not to use a chokehold. Officer uses a chokehold, officer's wrong. He's guilty of at least some level of manslaughter because he went outside procedure and it resulted in a death, even if he didn't intend it, right? That was my initial thought. But then, okay, well, wait a minute. In his training, what is a chokehold? And a chokehold, according to NYPD, is where you're doing restriction of the arteries and you're cutting off the flow of blood to the brain, not putting somebody basically in a chin lock, which is what he did. So, do I think you should go out and jack with a guy on the street for selling loose cigarettes? No. Why did he get jacked with? Because shopkeepers paying the tax wanted him jacked with. We should look at that too. But then, so do I think you should do it? No. But if you put me on a grand jury and said, do we bring an indictment against this officer? No. Because in the situation, he did follow procedure. I took a lot of flack for that. And it's like, I'm not saying that they're right. I'm saying that you're an officer, you're given an order, you have two choices. Quit your job or, carry out the order. And you have to make that decision every day. And going into that, I don't think that officer for a minute thought that he was going to kill that guy. I don't think for a minute he thought this was going to end in the guy's death. They simply wanted to put cuffs on him and take him to jail. And the guy resisted. Again, I can go back and say, we shouldn't be throwing people in jail for selling loose cigarettes, but this is the situation. And we have to judge that officer's actions based on who he was. And most of us that are anarchists, voluntarists, libertarians, we weren't always. And if we don't remember that, then we get very, very fogged in our vision and our understanding. And then our ability to win people over gets very, very weak.
Let me give you a quick note about policy, too. I train all the younger guys, even the older guys that have been there for a while. Anytime I get to train, I always tell people another gem of information. I say, listen, there's a difference between legal and illegal. There's a difference between that and policy. And there's a difference between open and closed policy. There's a difference between if it's not in there, open and closed. If it's not in there, we can do it. Or if it's not in there, we can't do it. So is that an option? And then does the policy make sense? Because in my career, both military and law enforcement, I've seen that this is an epidemic where a training center will dictate how operations happen in the field when it should be the exact opposite. The field should say, hey, training center, this works, this doesn't. And here's a good example. I know that you have some martial arts information and you've done some training. So this might sound a little funny to you. My law enforcement agency that I work for, they told me directly, and they did it in our defensive tactics class. They said, if someone presents a knife to you, you will fall back on your butt and roll backwards and kick your little legs and wait and hope that you can keep them at bay. And then, maybe once things work out, you can maybe pull your gun at that point and shoot them. Are you kidding me? That's what our policy says. And then we have a policy that says when I take out my ASP, my expandable baton, I can only hit you in one spot. And that's the little area in the back of your calf muscle. Well, how am I going to get there if you're fighting me?
Yeah.
Do I have to take a circle step around and duck my head down by your waist and your fists and take a little stab at your calf muscle? What's that? Are you kidding me? I can save you from getting shot. If you come at me with a knife and I have my baton out, I would more than happily break your hand and then put you in handcuffs and get you medical care and take you to the jail. Instead of you punching and kicking and hitting me and stabbing me while I try and hit you in the back of the leg with my little stick. So policy is one thing, and then legal and illegal are another thing. So like an officer was in a bad shoot. It was outside of policy. Well, did he do something to keep himself alive, even though it was out of policy? And was it illegal? Did he murder someone?
Yeah.
Or was it self-defense? And the only way that in the real world, outside of that paperwork, it's the only way you can survive. And they tell you to do this takedown and that takedown. The worst is handcuffing. They tell you this long, drawn-out process of how to handcuff someone, 37 steps. And you get in the field, and you go, okay, you're going to jail, turn around, give me your hands. That's it. So policy is an interesting beast.
Yeah, I mean, and like on that, what I've always said is, okay, we have to understand that cops are forced into confrontations that you and I would not be forced into. So you have to say,
I hate fighting people.
Well, I don't even mean that. I just mean like the initial contact, right?
Yeah.
Like I could go up and do something that initiates a contact with somebody once the contact occurred, I was legitimately in fear for my life, so I killed them. But I would also be judged maybe on manslaughter because you had no right to instigate. You see what I'm saying? So we have to give cops a little bit of a pass on sometimes they instigate a confrontation because there's a suspicious person or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And something. So they're going to start the contact where a civilian wouldn't. Once that happens, though, to be fair, you should say, if that was a civilian in that conflict who pulled a gun and shot the guy, was it a legitimate shoot? And I would think a lot of people have said, well, the other guy only had a gun and the cop shot him. Okay, but if you said, homeowner walked out in his yard, found a guy there with a knife, started talking to him, the guy came at him with a knife and he shot him, they'd say, well, the homeowner was right. Well, hold on, right? We have to judge these two people the same way then, and either someone coming at you with a knife is legitimate to shoot them or it's not. It's okay for me to do it, but it's not okay for you to do it because you're trained and wear a uniform. That's unfair in the opposite direction. And I'll tell you right now, if you come at me with a knife, I'm going to shoot the shit out of you.
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
I mean, we're not rolling around. I'm not getting cut. I'm not getting sliced up. And you can 21-foot roll your ass off. I'm telling you, right, rolling back on your back is actually not a bad idea if you're drawing with your gun while you're doing it. But move, get off the X, and start tapping holes in somebody. And anybody that wants to make the case that the knife is actually the superior weapon, just look at warfare. And look how fast the sword went away when gunpowder was invented, right? So we have to be fair if we're going to judge officers. I really believe that. And, I appreciate you being with us today, Pat.
I'm very happy, and I've been contributing to the community for a long time. I've been a listener since, maybe the 30s or 40s episodes, and I'm pretty sure my MSB is running out soon, so I'll go ahead and set that up. And I would love to come back for the next workshop you do. I got some real big ideas. I just taught on the off time for the last one, but
I'd like you to submit, for a 1-hour session. I'd love to have you do that. I would like to give you a chance here. I know that cops occasionally see their fellow officers doing something they absolutely should not be doing, and I know it's got to be a hard thing to intervene, but what would you say to your brother law enforcement officers if they do see one of their fellow officers acting in a way that's inconsistent with what they're supposed to be doing?
I think about that every day. And you know what? My old man, too, we disagree sometimes. He thinks he's liberty-oriented, but we have long talks that makes me suspicious. But he says all the time, hey, you see that Rodney King bullshit? He said, you need to be the guy that when that's happening, you walk up and you stand your ground and you say, we're done. And you stop that. And I'm like, that sounds great. I could be that guy. And I can tell you, I don't know if anyone's going to believe this or not, but I mean this with my heart and soul. I have never seen anything in the 3 years I've been on the street and in the 10-plus years I've done federal law enforcement and military work and drug seizures and all that. I have never seen anything immoral happen in front of me. And if I've heard about it, it wasn't people that I knew, and I would be more than happy to spill the beans on anybody that did so. It might be difficult emotionally or mentally, but it's an amazing thing when a man of stature and confidence walks into a situation like that and grabs you by the shoulder and says, we're done. It takes one person, and that spreads like wildfire. So should that ever happen in front of me, I'll be the guy to make sure that doesn't happen for two reasons. One, I don't want my friends getting arrested and going to jail as terrible cops. Two, I don't care if you're a bad guy or not. That's the way this country was founded, was We're going to detain you. We're going to arrest you. We're going to put you in jail. And then you're going to see your trial. Okay, this is not going to be trial by manslaughter. It's not going to happen in front of me, that's for sure.